Welcome, dear traveler, to a journey through the mist-shrouded corridors of medieval history. Tonight, we're stepping away from the bustling daylight world of kings and battles, away from the grand narratives of conquest and glory, and into something far more intimate and strange. We're venturing into the quiet darkness of medieval bedchambers, where the flickering light of rushes and candles reveals sleep habits so peculiar they might seem like fragments from a dream. Before we begin this gentle exploration together, I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight? Are you perhaps already nestled beneath your own covers, ready to drift into the past? If these soft journeys through history bring you comfort and help you rest, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next story we'll share together. There's something wonderfully soothing about discovering that even our ancestors, separated by centuries, shared the same fundamental need for rest, though they pursued it in ways that would seem utterly foreign to our modern eyes. Tonight, we'll wander through stone corridors where entire families slept together in single beds, where the night was split not into one long sleep, but two distinct slumbers, and where the boundary between dreams and waking was far more permeable than we might imagine. So dim your lights, settle into your pillows, and let us begin this quiet pilgrimage into the sleeping chambers of medieval Europe. Picture, if you will, a small village in 13th century England. The sun has long since disappeared behind rolling hills dotted with oak and ash trees. The air carries the scent of wood smoke curling from thatched roofs, mixed with the earthy smell of damp soil and the faint sweetness of hay stored in barns. In the distance, a church bell tolls the hour, not to mark time as we know it, but to call the faithful to their evening prayers before the long night ahead. Inside a modest stone cottage, a family prepares for sleep. But their preparation looks nothing like ours. There are no separate bedrooms, no individual beds lined with fresh linens. Instead, a single wooden frame dominates the main room, strung with ropes that serve as springs, topped with a mattress stuffed with straw and whatever soft materials the family has managed to gather. Perhaps some wool from those sheep, or if they've been fortunate, a few precious feathers from geese. The mother gently banks the fire in the hearth, not extinguishing it entirely, for the night will grow cold and someone will need to tend it in the dark hours. The father checks the wooden shutters, ensuring they're secure against the night air that carries with it not just cold, but the whispered fears of a world where darkness held genuine mysteries and dangers. The children, still young enough to find magic in shadows, gather around the bed that will soon hold not just their small family, but perhaps a traveling merchant who has sought shelter for the night, or a servant who sleeps at the foot of the bed on a simple pallet. This scene, repeated in countless variations across medieval Europe, reveals our first glimpse into sleeping habits that would seem impossibly intimate to our modern sensibilities. Privacy, as we understand it, was not just uncommon, it was virtually non-existent. The very concept of sleeping alone was so foreign that it was often viewed with suspicion or pity. Now, let us drift deeper into the night, following the gentle rhythm of medieval sleep. As the family settles into their shared bed, something remarkable happens. Unlike our modern expectation of 8 uninterrupted hours of rest, these medieval sleepers are preparing for what they simply call first sleep. This initial slumber will last approximately 4 hours, carrying them through the deepest part of the night until somewhere around midnight or 1 in the morning. The cottage grows quiet, save for the soft crackling of banked coals and the gentle breathing of the sleepers. Outside, the night settles over the village like a familiar blanket. An owl calls from the church tower. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and falls silent. The wind rustles through the thatch overhead, occasionally sending a small cascade of dried grass onto the floor below. Then, as natural as sunrise, the sleepers begin to wake. This is not the jarring awakening of a modern alarm clock, but a gentle emergence from sleep that feels as organic as breathing. The father stirs first, his body following rhythms older than civilization itself. The mother follows, and soon the entire household is quietly, peacefully awake in the deep of night. Welcome to the watch, that mysterious period between first and second sleep that defined medieval nights for centuries. This was not insomnia or restlessness, but a recognized and valued part of the daily rhythm. In this quiet hour or two of darkness, the medieval world came alive in ways that daylight never allowed. Listen closely, and you can almost hear the gentle murmur of conversation drifting from cottage windows. Husbands and wives, lying side by side in beds shared with children and servants, would speak in low tones about the day's work, tomorrow's plans, or matters of the heart that somehow seemed easier to voice in darkness. Children, not quite asleep, but not fully awake, would drift between dreams and the comforting sound of their parents' voices. The father might rise quietly, moving carefully around the sleeping forms of his family. Perhaps he steps outside into the crisp night air to check on the livestock, ensuring the chickens are safely roosted and the cow is settled in her stall. The night air carries sounds differently than day. Every footstep on packed earth seems amplified. Every rustle of straw or gentle lowing of cattle echoes with unusual clarity. Meanwhile, the mother might remain in bed, using this wakeful time for quiet reflection or prayer. Medieval Christians often viewed these night hours as particularly sacred, a time when the veil between earthly concerns and divine presence seemed thinnest. She might whisper prayers for her family's health, for good weather for the harvest, or for protection from the various dangers that medieval life presented. In monasteries scattered across the countryside, this night waking took on even more profound significance. Brother Thomas, let's imagine, sleeps on a simple wooden cot in a dormitory with dozens of his fellow monks. When the bell tolls for matins sometime around 2 in the morning, he rises not from deep sleep, but from this natural period of wakefulness. The transition from rest to prayer feels seamless, as if his body and soul have been preparing for this sacred duty throughout the night. The monastery chapel fills with the sound of sandaled feet on stone floors, the rustling of woolen robes, and the gentle clearing of throats as the brothers prepare for the night office. In the flickering light of candles arranged around the choir stalls, their faces appear both weary and deeply peaceful. This is not an interruption of sleep, but its natural complement, a time when prayer and rest interweave like threads in a tapestry. The chanted prayers echo off stone walls and vaulted ceilings, creating a sound that seems to exist outside of time itself. Gregorian melodies rise and fall like gentle waves, carrying the monks through psalms and readings that have been spoken in these same night hours for centuries. When the office concludes, they return to their cots, not with the feeling of having been woken too early, but with the satisfaction of having participated in the natural rhythm of prayer and rest that defines their calling. But let us leave the monastery and return to our village, where different families experience the watch in their own ways. In the Lord's manor house, constructed of dressed stone and timber, the night takes on a different character entirely. Lady Eleanor lies in a bed that represents a fortune. Carved oak posts support curtains of rich wool dyed deep blue with precious indigo. The mattress beneath her is stuffed not with straw but with swan down, and the linen sheets, though coarse by our standards, represent luxury beyond the dreams of the villagers in their cottages. Yet, even in this comparative grandeur, privacy remains elusive. Her personal maid sleeps on a trundle bed that can be pushed under the great bed during the day. A page sleeps on a pallet near the door, ready to answer any summons. When the watch comes, Lady Eleanor might rise and move to the sola, a private chamber attached to the bedchamber, where she can tend to correspondence by candlelight or work on embroidery that requires the kind of concentration only night's quiet can provide. The Lord himself might use these wakeful hours to review accounts with his steward or to plan the next day's activities. In a world where literacy was rare and precious, the ability to read by candlelight during these quiet hours was both a privilege and a responsibility. Documents relating to land management, legal disputes, or correspondence with other nobles couldn't wait for daylight. The business of medieval lordship continued even in darkness. As we move through the manor house during these night hours, we encounter a world alive with quiet activity. In the kitchens, the baker has already begun his work, kneading dough for the next day's bread by the light of the ovens. The rhythmic sound of kneading echoes softly through stone quarry servants move like doors. Shadows, their soft leather shoes making barely a whisper on worn flagstones. The stablemaster checks on the horses, particularly valuable destriers that represent not just transportation, but status and military power. In their stalls, the great war horses shift and snort softly, their breath visible in the cold night air. The sound of hooves on straw, the gentle nickering of horses recognizing a familiar voice, the creak of leather harness. All of these sounds create a symphony of medieval nightlife that our ancestors would have found as comforting as we find the hum of electricity or the distant sound of traffic. Now imagine yourself walking through the great hall of the manor, where earlier in the evening dozens of people shared the communal meal. The long tables have been cleared and pushed against the walls. Benches serve as beds for servants, squires, and retainers who couldn't fit in the limited private chambers. Even here, in what we might consider uncomfortable circumstances, the watch is observed. Soft conversations drift through the darkness, punctuated by the occasional cough or the rustle of someone adjusting their position on the hard wooden bench. The great hall never truly sleeps. The fire in the central hearth burns low but never dies completely. Someone must tend it throughout the night, adding logs when the flames die down, banking the coals to ensure they'll last until morning. The person assigned this duty, perhaps a young servant boy, experiences the watch not as a time of rest and reflection, but as a period of responsibility and quiet vigilance. Outside the manor walls, the village continues its own version of night watch. The parish church stands like a beacon in the darkness, its bell tower rising above the humble cottages. Inside, a single candle burns before the altar, the eternal flame that represents Christ's presence in the community. Sometimes the parish priest rises during the watch to pray the night office alone, his voice echoing in the empty nave as he follows the same rhythms observed in monasteries throughout Christendom. The churchyard, with its collection of simple wooden crosses and occasional stone monuments, holds no terror for medieval people during these night hours. Death was too familiar a companion to inspire the Gothic dread that later centuries would associate with midnight graveyards. Instead, the church and its surrounding burial ground represented continuity, community, and the promise of resurrection that made the hardships of medieval life bearable. As the watch period draws to its natural close, families throughout the village begin to settle back into bed for their second sleep. This return to slumber feels different from the first, less like falling into an abyss and more like sinking into a familiar embrace. The conversations have been had, the prayers offered, the necessary tasks completed. Now comes the deeper rest that will carry them through to dawn. The second sleep that follows the watch carries a different quality entirely, deeper, more restorative, filled with the vivid dreams that medieval people believed held messages from the divine realm. As our village family settles back into their shared bed, the straw mattress rustling softly beneath them, they enter a phase of rest that modern sleep science has only recently begun to understand and appreciate. In the pre-dawn hours, when the world rests in its deepest silence, the dreams come with unusual clarity and intensity. Medieval people paid careful attention to this nocturnal visions, believing them to be windows into realms beyond ordinary experience. The mother might dream of her departed grandmother, offering guidance about the coming harvest. The father could find himself walking through fields of grain that shimmer with an otherworldly light, interpreting this as a favorable omen for the season ahead. Children, their young minds still fluid between waking and sleeping states, often experienced dreams so vivid they seemed more real than reality itself. A young girl might dream of angels walking through the village, their wings rustling like wind through wheat. A boy could find himself conversing with saints whose stories he'd heard during Sunday sermons, their faces kind and familiar despite existing only in his sleeping imagination. These dreams weren't dismissed as mere fantasies, but were carefully remembered, discussed during the following day's work, and often brought to the village priest for interpretation. Dream interpretation was considered a serious skill, part spiritual guidance and part practical wisdom. A dream of clear water might suggest good health ahead, while murky streams could warn of illness. Streams of fire might predict conflict or passion, depending on whether the flames brought warmth or destruction. As the first pale light of dawn begins to creep through the gaps in the wooden shutters, our medieval family slowly emerges from their second sleep. This awakening feels natural and complete, unmarked by the grogginess that often accompanies our modern alarm-driven mornings. Their bodies have followed rhythms as old as humanity itself, moving through cycles of rest and wakefulness that honor both physical needs and spiritual practices. The father rises first, as is his custom, moving quietly to avoid waking the younger children who might steal a few more minutes of precious sleep. He opens the shutters carefully, allowing the gray pre-dawn light to filter into the cottage. The air carries the fresh scent of morning dew and the distant sound of roosters announcing the coming day from farms scattered across the valley. Now let us drift away from our humble cottage and toward the great castle that dominates the valley, its towers and walls silhouetted against the lightening sky. Within those massive stone walls, the sleeping arrangements tell their own fascinating story of medieval life, one where proximity to power determined not just where you slept, but how you slept. In the great keep, Lord William's bedchamber represents the pinnacle of medieval luxury. Yet even here, privacy remains a foreign concept. The Lord's massive bed, carved from oak and draped with tapestries depicting scenes of courtly love and noble hunts, occupies the center of a chamber that serves multiple purposes. This room functions simultaneously as bedroom, office, reception hall, and display of wealth and power. The bed itself tells a story of status and craftsmanship that would have been immediately understood by any medieval visitor. The posts, thick as a man's torso, rise nearly to the vaulted ceiling, supporting a canopy that provides both warmth and a sense of enclosed intimacy within the larger space. The curtains, woven from wool dyed with expensive pigments, deep crimsons achieved with cochineal insects, rich blues created from precious lapis lazuli, can be drawn completely closed, creating a private world within the public chamber. Yet even within this cocoon of luxury, Lord William rarely sleeps alone. Lady Margaret shares his bed, of course, but their personal servants sleep nearby on pallets that can be quickly moved aside when the chamber serves its daytime functions. The Lord Squire sleeps on a bench near the door, ready to respond to any nighttime summons. A page might curl up on a pile of furs near the great fireplace, tending the flames through the night hours. When the watch comes to the castle, it brings its own rhythms and responsibilities. Lord William might rise to review documents by candlelight, land grants that require his seal, legal disputes that demand his judgment, or correspondence from other nobles that could affect the delicate balance of regional politics. The ability to read and write in an age of widespread illiteracy makes these quiet night hours invaluable for the business of governance. Lady Margaret uses her wakeful periods differently, often rising to check on her children in the adjacent chamber or to supervise the work of her ladies-in-waiting. Medieval noble women carried enormous responsibilities for household management, and the watch provided precious time to plan menus for upcoming feasts. review the work of seamstresses creating garments for the family, or ensure that the castle's stores of preserved foods would last through the winter months. The children of noble families experienced sleep in ways that reflected both privilege and the constant preparation for their future roles. Young Lord Geoffrey, heir to his father's lands and titles, sleeps in a bed almost as grand as his parents', but he shares his chamber with his tutor and a young page of similar age. Even in sleep, his education continues. The tutor might wake during the watch to quiz the boy on Latin phrases or mathematical concepts, using the quiet hours for intensive learning that the busy daylight schedule doesn't allow. His sister, Lady Isabel, sleeps in a chamber with her governess and several young women of good family who serve as both companions and students in the complex arts of noble womanhood. During the watch, they might practice embroidery by candlelight, learning the intricate stitches that will one day adorn church vestments or household linens. Or they might recite poetry in the courtly love tradition, memorizing verses that celebrate idealized romance and chivalric virtue. The castle's great hall, even more than the manor house we visited earlier, becomes a dormitory during the night hours. Knights and men-at-arms sleep on benches or straw pallets, their weapons within easy reach. The sound of armored men shifting in their sleep creates a unique metallic symphony. The gentle clink of chainmail, the soft scrape of sword hilts against wooden benches, the muffled thud of a mailed fist adjusting a pillow made from a folded cloak. During the watch, these professional warriors often gather in small groups to discuss tactics, share stories of past battles, or maintain their equipment. The soft sound of whetstones against sword blades echoes through the hall as they sharpen weapons by the light of rush torches. Some practice their letters, painfully scratching out words on wax tablets, trying to improve literacy skills that could advance their careers in an increasingly administrative world. The castle's servants experience the night differently still. In the kitchens, bakers begin their work during the deep night hours, their ovens glowing like small volcanoes in the darkness. The rhythmic sound of kneading dough, the soft whisper of flour being sifted, the gentle bubble of yeast working in wooden bowls. These sounds create their own lullaby for those trying to sleep in chambers above or adjacent to the working areas. Stable hands sleep in the lofts above the horses, their rest interrupted by the needs of valuable animals that represent their lord's wealth and military power. The great destriers, bred for war and worth more than most peasant families earn in a lifetime, require constant attention. During the watch, a stable master might check on a mare about to foal, or ensure that a knight's favorite mount remains healthy before an important journey. The castle's walls themselves seem to breathe with life during these night hours. Guards pace the battlements, their footsteps echoing off stone as they maintain vigilance against threats both real and imagined. The sound of their movements creates a comforting rhythm for those sleeping within, a constant reminder that protection surrounds them, that the dangers of the medieval world are held at bay by thick walls and loyal service. Now let us descend from the heights of nobility and venture into the urban world of medieval towns, where merchants and craftsmen have created their own unique sleeping arrangements. In the narrow houses that line cobblestone streets, families adapt to vertical living in ways that would seem impossibly cramped by modern standards. Master Edmund the baker and his family live above their shop in a building that rises 4 stories towards the sky. The ground floor houses the bakery itself, with its massive ovens that never fully cool. The smell of baking bread permeates every level of the house, creating an atmosphere of perpetual warmth and comfort that makes even the smallest chambers feel welcoming. The family sleeps on the 2nd floor in a chamber directly above the shop. The heat rising from the ovens below makes this the warmest room in the house, a crucial advantage during the bitter cold of medieval winters. Master Edmund and his wife share a bed with their youngest children, while older offspring sleep on pallets arranged around the room's perimeter. An apprentice baker sleeps in the corner, ready to tend the ovens during the night hours when the next day's bread must begin its slow transformation from grain to sustenance. During the watch, the baker's house comes alive with quiet industry. Master Edmund often rises to check the dough that has been set to rise overnight, adjusting the temperature of the ovens to ensure perfect conditions for the morning's baking. His wife might use these hours to prepare the spices and herbs that will flavor special occasion breads, adding caraway seeds for feast day loaves, or mixing honey into dough destined for wealthy customers who can afford such luxury. The apprentices experience their own version of the watch, learning not just the technical skills of baking, but the subtle arts of timing and temperature that separate masterful bread from merely adequate sustenance. They learn to read the sounds of fermenting dough, to judge the heat of ovens by the color of the flames, to understand the way humidity affects the rising process. In the floors above, other members of the extended household pursue their own night activities. A journeyman baker, working toward earning his master's credentials, might spend watch hours practicing the elaborate decorative techniques that mark truly skilled craftsmen. Using precious white flour and expensive sugar when available, he creates small test pieces, miniature versions of the ornate confections that graced noble tables during important celebrations. The urban night carries different sounds than its rural counterpart. Instead of owls and distant cattle, the town watch calls out the hours as they patrol the streets. 2 o'clock and all is well echoes between narrow buildings, creating a rhythm that helps urban dwellers track the passage of night hours. The sound of iron-shod hooves on cobblestones announces late travelers, while the distant bark of dogs creates an urban symphony that medieval town dwellers found as comforting as rural folk found the sounds of countryside night. In the merchants' quarter, where successful traders live in houses that rival noble dwellings in their comfort, the watch takes on commercial significance. Master Robert, the wool merchant, often uses these quiet hours to review his accounts, calculating profits and losses by candlelight. The complex mathematics of medieval trade, converting between different regional currencies, accounting for the varying weights and measures used in different towns, planning routes that balance profit against the very real dangers of highway robbery, require the kind of concentrated attention that only night's peace can provide. His wife, Mistress Catherine manages her own complex enterprises during the watch. As the unofficial banker for several smaller merchants, she maintains careful records of loans and investments that help fuel the town's growing economy. Her chambers contain locked chests filled with silver coins, carefully weighed and counted, representing the accumulated wealth of families who have successfully navigated the treacherous waters of medieval commerce. Their children sleep in chambers furnished with luxuries that approach those found in minor noble households. Beds with carved headboards, mattresses stuffed with wool rather than straw, linen sheets that are changed weekly rather than seasonally. Yet even these privileged urban children share their sleeping spaces with servants and apprentices, reinforcing the medieval reality that privacy was a concept that barely existed even among the wealthy. The apprentices and journeymen who populate these urban households experience the watch as a time of learning and quiet advancement. Young Thomas, apprentice to Master Robert at the age of 12, sleeps on a narrow cot in the merchant's counting chamber, surrounded by the tools of commerce: scales for weighing precious metals, ledgers bound in leather, and strong boxes secured with elaborate iron locks. During his wakeful hours in the deep night, he practices the careful script required for maintaining accounts, copying letters by candlelight to improve his penmanship. The sounds that drift through the merchant quarter during these hours tell their own stories of medieval urban life. From the dyer's street comes the gentle splash of fabric being worked in vats, the process of creating the deep blues and rich reds that mark quality cloth requiring round-the-clock attention. The metalworker's quarter contributes its own symphony, the soft tap, tap, tap of hammers working precious metals, the hiss of hot iron being tempered in water, the gentle scrape of files shaping delicate ornaments. Even the town's religious life continues through the night hours. The bell tower of St. Bartholomew's Church marks not just the passing hours, but calls the faithful to private devotions during the watch. In modest chambers throughout the town, devout Christians rise from their warm beds to kneel on cold floors, whispering prayers that rise like incense through the darkness. Now let us venture beyond the walls of town and castle into the most humble, yet perhaps most authentic, medieval sleeping experience, the simple cottage of a peasant family. Here, stripped of luxury and pretense, we find sleep in its most elemental form, shaped by the rhythms of agricultural life and the constant companionship of the animals that provide both livelihood and warmth. William the plowman and his family inhabit a single-room dwelling that measures barely 20 feet square, its walls constructed of wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with mud, straw, and animal dung. The roof, thatched with rye straw, slopes low enough that a tall man must win duck moving about the edges of the room. Yet this humble space pulses with life and warmth that no palace chamber can match. The family's bed occupies nearly a quarter of the cottage's floor space, a simple wooden frame supporting ropes that cradle a mattress stuffed with whatever soft materials the seasons provide. In autumn, it might contain fresh straw from the harvest, sweet-smelling and golden. By spring, this has compressed and darkened, mixed with wool combed from their sheep, and perhaps some precious goose feathers saved from the Christmas feast. But this peasant bed holds more than just the human family. On cold nights, which comprise most nights in medieval England, young lambs might share the warmth, their soft bleating creating a gentle counterpoint to human breathing. Chickens roost in the rafters overhead, occasionally dropping feathers or small bits of straw onto the sleeping family below. The family's pig, too valuable to risk to wolves or thieves, sleeps in one corner of the cottage, its contented snorts and shuffles becoming part of the night's familiar soundtrack. When the watch comes to this humble dwelling, it brings responsibilities unknown to noble households. William might rise to check on his oxen, the massive beasts whose strength enables his family's survival. These animals, worth more than the cottage itself, sleep in a simple shelter to the main attaché winter dwelling. During harshest nights, their body heat helps warm the entire household, while their gentle breathing and occasional lowing create a comforting presence in the darkness. His wife, Margaret, uses the watch hours for tasks that daylight's demanding schedule rarely allows. She might card wool by the light of a rush candle, preparing the fibers that will eventually become the family's clothing. The gentle scraping sound of the cards working through fleece mingles with the soft crackle of the banked fire and the peaceful breathing of children who have never known a night without the presence of animals and family surrounding them. Their eldest son, Peter, now 15, and strong enough to handle a plow team, often spends his watch hours mending the tools or preparing for the next day's labor. Medieval peasant life allowed no separation between work and rest. Every moment served the greater purpose of survival. He might sharpen his father's scythe by the dim light of burning rushes, the rhythmic sound of whetstone against metal, creating a meditation on the eternal cycle of growth, harvest, and renewal that governed their lives. The cottage holds smells that tell the story of medieval rural existence more eloquently than any chronicle. Wood smoke from the central fire mingles with the earthy scent of the dirt floor, swept daily but never truly clean. The sweet hay smell of the mattress combines with the warm animal odors of sheep, chickens, and pig. In one corner, a small store of apples from their single tree adds a note of sweetness to the air, while dried herbs hanging from the rafters contribute their own subtle fragrances. Mint for digestive troubles, lavender for peaceful sleep, and rosemary for remembrance. During the watch, young Mary, their daughter of 12, might help her mother with the endless task of preparing food. Medieval peasant meals required constant attention. Grain must be ground by hand, vegetables preserved in salt or stored in root cellars, and the precious few eggs their chickens provide must be carefully rationed. The sound of a hand quern grinding barley into meal creates its own gentle rhythm, while the soft scraping of knives preparing vegetables for the next day's pottage adds to the symphony of domestic industry. The peasant family's second sleep comes with its own unique characteristics. Exhausted by physical labor that begins before dawn and continues until darkness, they sink into rest with a completeness that our modern lives rarely achieve. Their dreams, when they remember them, often center on the simple concerns that dominate their waking hours. Dreams of abundant harvests, of healthy livestock, of sufficient food to last through winter's lean months. Yet even these humble dreams carry touches of the divine. Margaret might dream of the Virgin Mary walking through their small garden, blessing their vegetables with her presence. William could find himself in conversation with Saint Isidore, the patron saint of farmers, receiving guidance about when to plant or when to harvest. These visions, born of deep faith and deeper exhaustion, provide comfort and guidance in lives that offer little certainty beyond the changing seasons. As dawn approaches, the peasant cottage begins to stir with the earliest sounds of the working day. The rooster's crow from the neighboring farm signals the approaching end of night, while the gentle lowing of cattle from the common pasture announces that even the animals understand the rhythm of agricultural life. The fire, tended carefully through the night hours, begins to receive fresh fuel as the family prepares for another day of labor that will begin before full daylight and continue until darkness falls once again. Now let us turn our attention to one of medieval society's most fascinating sleeping arrangements, the communal dormitories of monasteries, where dozens of monks pursue holiness through shared rest and carefully orchestrated night prayers. Brother Francis sleeps on a simple wooden cot in the dormitory of St. Dunstan's Abbey, one of 40 beds arranged in precise rows beneath a vaulted stone ceiling that soars 30 feet overhead. The monastic dormitory represents sleep stripped of all personal comfort, yet elevated to spiritual purpose. Each monk's bed consists of a wooden frame, a straw mattress contained in rough sacking, a single wool blanket, and a small pillow stuffed with chaff. No curtains provide privacy. No personal possessions mark individual spaces. The only decoration in the entire vast room consists of a simple wooden cross mounted on the far wall and a statue of the Virgin Mary in a niche near the dormitory entrance. Yet this apparent austerity creates its own form of profound peace. The sound of 40 men breathing in unison creates a gentle rhythm that seems to embody the communal nature of monastic life itself. The slight rustle of straw mattresses as monks adjust their positions in sleep mingles with the distant sound of wind moving through the abbey's stone corridors. Occasionally, the soft footfalls of the night watch Brother echo as he moves between the beds, ensuring that all remains peaceful through the dark hours. When the bell tolls for matins, usually around 2 in the morning, the dormitory transforms with remarkable efficiency. 40 monks rise as one, their movements coordinated by years of practice and devotion. The sound of sandaled feet on stone floors creates a gentle percussion as they file toward the chapel, their white wool habits rustling softly in the darkness. No words are spoken. The rule of Saint Benedict requires silence during these night hours. Yet the sense of shared purpose creates a communication more profound than any conversation. The Abbey Chapel during the night office presents one of medieval life's most transcendent experiences. Illuminated only by candles arranged around the choir stalls, the vast space seems to exist outside of ordinary time. The monks' voices, trained through years of daily practice, rise in Gregorian chant that echoes off stone walls and vaulted ceilings. These ancient melodies, unchanged for centuries, create harmonies that seem to bridge earth and heaven. Brother Francis finds his place in the choir stalls, the carved wooden seat worn smooth by generations of monks who have occupied this same position during countless night offices. The antiphonary before him contains the musical notation for chants that originated in the early centuries of Christianity, preserved and transmitted through an unbroken chain of monastic tradition. As he adds his voice to the communal prayer, he participates in a practice that connects him to monks across Europe and across centuries. The psalms chanted during matins speak directly to the experience of night watches and interrupted sleep. At midnight I will rise to give thanks unto thee, the monks sing, their voices creating harmonies that seem to make the stone walls themselves reverberate with devotion. I will meditate on thee in the night watches, they continue, transforming their interrupted rest into an when the night offering of praise that sanctifies the darkness itself office concludes, the return to the dormitory carries its own peaceful rhythm. The monks file back through stone corridors, their shadows dancing on walls in the flickering light of carried candles. Some return immediately to their cots for second sleep, while others remain in the chapel for private prayer or meditation. The dormitory gradually settles back into its peaceful breathing rhythm, though now the rest carries a different quality, deeper, more complete, touched by the divine encounter of the night office. The monastic experience of sleep reveals something profound about medieval attitudes toward rest and wakefulness. Rather than seeing night interruption as a burden, the monks transform it into opportunity, a chance to encounter the divine in darkness, to offer praise when the world sleeps, to find community in shared devotion. Their carefully regulated schedule creates a rhythm that honors both bodily needs and spiritual aspirations. In the Abbey Infirmary, Brother Sebastian tends to elderly monks whose bodies can no longer maintain the rigorous schedule of communal life. These venerable brothers, some in their 70s and 80s, remarkable ages in medieval times, sleep on slightly more comfortable beds with additional blankets and sometimes even small braziers to warm their chambers during the coldest months. Yet even in their physical weakness, they participate in the night watches, their whispered prayers joining the communal office from their beds when they cannot walk to the chapel. The Abbey's guest house presents yet another variation on medieval sleeping arrangements. Pilgrims, travelers, and visitors sleep in chambers that provide hospitality while maintaining the Abbey's spiritual atmosphere. These guests experience a unique form of medieval rest, comfortable enough to refresh weary travelers, yet simple enough to remind them of life's temporary nature and the importance of spiritual over material concerns. Noble guests might receive chambers with glazed windows and additional furnishings, while common pilgrims sleep in dormitory-style arrangements that echo the monks' own quarters. All guests, regardless of their worldly status, follow the Abbey's rhythm of prayer and rest, rising for matins if they choose, or lying quietly in their beds while the bells mark the passage of sacred time. Now, let us venture into the most unusual sleeping arrangement of medieval society: the crowded inns that served the growing number of travelers, merchants, and pilgrims who moved along Europe's expanding network of roads. The Red Lion Inn stands at a crossroads where the London to Canterbury pilgrimage route intersects with a major wool trading path, creating a constant stream of diverse guests who must somehow find rest under a single roof. Master Henry the innkeeper has created a complex system for managing sleep in his establishment. The inn's main sleeping chamber contains 6 large beds, each capable of accommodating 3 or 4 travelers, depending on their size and social status. Strangers routinely share not just rooms, but beds, creating intimate arrangements between people who have never met and likely will never meet again. The inn's sleeping arrangements follow unwritten but universally understood rules. Men and women are separated when possible, though married couples traveling together can claim space in a bed regardless of other occupants. Clergy receive respectful treatment, often being offered the side of the bed closest to the wall for additional privacy and security. Merchants, whose purses make them attractive targets for thieves, frequently sleep with their money belts secured around their waists and their most valuable possessions used as pillows. On a typical night, the inn's main sleeping chamber might contain a fascinating cross-section of medieval society. In the bed nearest the fireplace, a wool merchant from Flanders shares space with a knight returning from service in France, and a parish priest making his annual journey to Canterbury. Their conversation during the watch hours creates an impromptu exchange of news, gossip, and perspectives that rarely occurs in the more stratified environments of castle or village. The sounds of communal sleeping in medieval inns create their own unique symphony. Snoring from tired travelers mingles with the rustle of straw mattresses and the occasional creak of wooden bed frames. Someone inevitably talks in their sleep, often in languages unfamiliar to their bedmates. The sound of coins clinking softly announces that someone is checking their purse's security, while the gentle scrape of a knife being repositioned suggests that even in sleep, medieval travelers maintain awareness of potential dangers. During the watch, the inn's common room becomes a center of informal activity. Travelers who cannot return to sleep gather around the banked fire, sharing stories, news from distant places, and sometimes conducting business that requires the discretion of night hours. The innkeeper's wife serves simple fare to those who hunger: bread, cheese, and weak ale that helps pass the wakeful hours until second sleep beckons. The inn's stables present their own sleeping arrangements, where poorer travelers and servants bed down among the horses and pack animals. These humble accommodations offer warmth from the animals' body heat and security from their master's proximity, though at the cost of privacy and comfort. Yet even here, the watch brings its own rhythms. Stable hands checking on valuable horses, travelers ensuring their possessions remained secure, and the occasional conversation between men whose different social stations become less important in the democratic darkness of the stable. As our long journey through medieval sleep draws toward its natural conclusion, we find ourselves surrounded by the gentle sounds of a world preparing for dawn. The roosters have begun their ancient duty of announcing the approaching day, while church bells across the countryside prepare to call the faithful to morning prayers. The night watches have ended, the second sleeps have run their course, and medieval Europe stirs with the timeless rhythm of awakening that has marked human mornings since time immemorial. Yet, within these humble chambers and grand halls, there existed one sleeping arrangement so extraordinary, so utterly foreign to our modern understanding, that it reveals perhaps the deepest truth about medieval life: the complete absence of what we would recognize as personal space or individual privacy. Tonight, let us witness the most intimate yet public of all medieval sleeping customs: the practice of bed sharing between complete strangers. Picture yourself as a weary merchant, your pack animals footsore, and your purse lighter after days of trading in distant markets. The sun has long since disappeared behind rolling hills, and the autumn mist clings to the valley floor like a gray blanket. Your destination is the Pilgrim's Rest, a modest inn that sits where three ancient roads converge, its timber frame glowing warmly in the light of oil lamps that swing gently from iron brackets. The innkeeper, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands and knowing eyes, greets you at the threshold. "Welcome, good sir," she says, her voice carrying the comfortable authority of someone who has housed countless travelers through numberless nights. "We've space for you, though you'll be sharing with Master Thomas the goldsmith and Brother Benedict, who carries messages for the abbey at Winchester. And so you find yourself climbing narrow wooden stairs that creak beneath your feet, following the flickering light of a tallow candle as it illuminates rough-hewn walls decorated only with the occasional cross or image of Saint Christopher, patron of travelers. The chamber you enter contains 3 beds, each large enough to accommodate 3 or 4 adults, their wooden frames draped with curtains that can provide some small measure of privacy when drawn closed. Your bedmates for the night are already settling in when you arrive. Master Thomas, a man of middle years with the careful hands and sharp eyes of his trade, has claimed the side of the bed nearest the shuttered window. He nods politely as you approach, his manner suggesting someone accustomed to the peculiar intimacies of medieval travel. Brother Benedict, distinguished by his brown wool habit and the rope belt that marks him as a Franciscan, has positioned himself on the far side, his weathered face peaceful in the candlelight. The bed itself tells a story of countless previous occupants. The straw mattress covered in rough linen bears the impressions of many bodies, while the wool blankets carry the accumulated scents of travelers from distant places: leather and horse sweat, incense and parchment, the earthy smell of roads and the faint sweetness of ale consumed in taverns along the way. The pillow you share is stuffed with feathers that have seen better days, compressed by years of supporting heads that carried dreams, worries, and plans across the medieval landscape. As the 3 of you settle into sleep, the sounds of the inn create their own gentle lullaby. From the chamber next door comes the soft murmur of conversation. Perhaps other merchants discussing the prices of wool in London, or pilgrims sharing stories of miracles witnessed at distant shrines. Below, in the common room, the last of the evening's drinkers exchange final words before seeking their own rest, their voices blending with fire and the crackle of the dying bark of the inn's dog as it patrols the courtyard. And so, dear traveler, as the first light of dawn creeps across the medieval landscape, our gentle journey through the sleeping chambers of the past draws to its peaceful close. We have wandered together through stone corridors and humble cottages, witnessed the sacred rhythms of two sleep cycles, and shared beds with strangers whose dreams carried the hopes and fears of a distant age. In these quiet hours, we have discovered that sleep, perhaps more than any grand battle or royal decree, reveals the true heart of medieval life, intimate, communal, and profoundly human. May these whispered stories from centuries past carry you gently into your own rest, knowing that across time we all share the same fundamental need for peace in darkness. Until we meet again in another corner of history.